Hello, everyone, and welcome to this EBN web seminar. I'm Lynn Gresham with EBN, your host. In the battle to contain healthcare costs, AI and prepayment accuracy get a lot of attention, making it easy to lose sight of the fact that health plans and payers are leaving money on the table today. The reality is that post-pay recovery isn't just about potential savings. It's about refunding actual dollars that go straight to your bottom line. Data shows that plans can recover up to 1% of annual claims spend, which can boost margins. Today, we're going to look at how plans can make good on post-pay recovery without a massive tech overhaul or annoying their members. Walking us through the post-pay playbook will be Jeff Walter, President of Professional Benefits Administrators, and Laura Hescock, CEO of Intellivo. I'll briefly introduce them. Jeff joined Professional Benefits Administrators, or PBA, a family-owned TPA in 1989 after completing his Navy service. Much of his career at PBA has been spent in the development of systems, integrating technology, and strengthening operations. Jeff now leads PBA as its president and is currently transitioning the company to the second generation, developing leadership from within and preparing PBA for the challenges ahead. Since joining Intellivo in 2016, Laura has led with a vision to redefine what's possible in health plans subrogation and post-pay recovery through data, technology, and client-centered execution. She has over 2 decades of experience in healthcare, SaaS, and technology consulting. Before assuming the CEO role, Laura served as Intellivo's Chief Strategy Officer, where she led the company's rapid client expansion and helped secure multiple Fortune 500 organizations as clients. Now, without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Brian, our moderator, to get us going.
Thank you, Lynn. Really appreciate being here. Thanks to all of our audience. I'm here with Laura and Jeff. And we are here to talk about the post-pay journey of PBA and how post-pay has emerged as critically important in this high-cost environment. So, Jeff, I'm going to turn it over to you. Start off with an introduction. Give us an overview of PBA. Tell us about the firm and what got you here.
Thanks, Brian. Again, thank you guys for having me here today. This has been fun. Just digging in, kind of getting my feet wet on really what we've accomplished. So PBA was founded in 1985 by my dad and his partner. And, we've gone through a lot of change, a lot of evolution over the years. And, so we're at this point now where we're at our second and third generation involved in the business. We look at ourselves a lot like a startup. So we don't hang on a lot to that history, from we always did it this way. It's what's got us here. But and we're actually getting ready for our annual planning next week. And so there's all this brainstorming that's going into, okay, so based on our 10-year, 5-year, 3-year goals, what do we have to get done in this next year? And so that's how we kind of look at ourselves like a startup. So we're never finished. That's the bottom line. Continuous improvement is just such a key to what we do. And honestly, that's where we draw on things that we're maybe not really strong at, or maybe we shouldn't be strong at, and partnering with people to bring them into our workflows to actually accomplish those things.
Laura, give us a little about Intellivo.
Absolutely. We are going into our 27th year, and Intellivo does one thing. We do subrogation and post-pay recovery for health plans, TPAs, and payers. And because we do that one thing, that is all we think about and all we invest in. And it's specifically, how do we continue to evolve the subrogation process to make it less disruptive for members and ultimately have higher financial outcomes?
Excellent. So a little about these firms. So Jeff, let's set the table. In terms of what you're hearing from clients about post-pay, how much have things changed in just the last few years?
Oh my gosh. So I can't take you like for PB's whole journey, but I can definitely go, maybe 20 years ago. That's when we were, totally built around our processes. What procedure codes, what diagnosis codes are attached to these claims coming in? And then how do we train our adjusters to do what actions based on what comes in on the claim? So a lot of single points, a lot of decisions by people. And then at the point that, the thing hits, we start our process of requesting information. When the right answers hit, then we start a process of getting it over to our attorneys that we're working with in order to get these claims considered. 10 to 15 years ago, somewhere in that ballpark, we decided, okay, well, we need to up this game a little bit, and let's continue to do what we do. Let's continue to stop these claims, look at them, make sure that they're qualified, but let's also add a data analytics on the back end. So let's do a scrub on our claims. Let's look at the whole history. Let's see what else we might be missing. Then a couple years ago, just most of the demand is really coming operationally, and what is hitting us as an operation in order to handle these the claims and the calls and everything that go along with it. That's where we decided to really convert to the post-payment pursuit. All right.
Interesting. So you were doing it in-house
Yes.
with an attorney.
Yes.
And then from there, you went to,
We had another vendor that we were sending over for the data analytics, and then they would take claims that we captured, and they would take what they found within the data. So there'd be two feeds. So honestly, a duplication of work as well. So they're kind of looking at the same things we're looking at, and we're doing some of the information and then picking up what they're finding in the claims as well.
Interesting. So Laura, let me bring it back over to you. When organizations talk about post-pay tools, what are we talking about?
Usually, we're talking about the recovery process. Jeff actually said that process. And it is very process driven, but ultimately, what you're trying to do is find alternative payment sources that you can be reimbursed back to the plan. But the process that, as Jeff was describing it, is using the claims to then identify, look for hints, and then ultimately then gather more information from the member. So either you're pending and reaching out to the member with a questionnaire and holding on to that to that claim until you pay it, until you get the questionnaire back, or in that example too, you've outsourced it where there's analytics being run on the claim, but it's still reaching out to the member to gather the information of the other payment source. So when it comes to subrogation and that process, it's really focused on not the identification, it's focused on once you've identified something all the way through to recovery. Where the exciting opportunity really lies is extending that view, extending that aperture to, it's really that identification step that is really determines essentially the health of the entire recovery process.
Right. Lynn, I think this would be a good point to do our first poll for our audience members.
Great. We'd like your feedback on this poll question. How would you rate your organization's post-pay recovery efforts by dollars recovered? Would you say it's satisfactory? Okay. Unsatisfactory? It needs an overhaul? Or you're not sure? Just click on the appropriate response in the upper left-hand corner and be sure to submit those answers. We've got a large group on, so I'm going to give it a few more seconds to tally. Answers are still coming in. Thanks for your responses.
Can't wait to see what we've got going here.
Close the poll and take a look at our results.
Let's take a look.
Not sure.
Yeah, not sure, 38%. Okay, unsatisfactory, 8, needs an overhaul. So well over 50% of folks, only about a quarter of folks say it's satisfactory. So that's why we're here. So Jeff, let's bring it back. Let's bring it back to your journey. It wasn't just who was doing it, it was how you were doing it. Talk about that process and what led you to make that change.
It's really crazy. I'll start a slightly different place, and that is, it's so funny. One of the biggest complaints we would receive from our clients, it would always come like this. It would always come like, hey, you're really annoying our employees and you're sending these letters out. But then they would always give us the caveat, they'd always drop this in, but we know you got to do it to try to get the sub rows. So it's always like presenting the problem, but then giving us an excuse not to create the solution. And I think we didn't listen to that as well as we could have back in the day. And so the process, it very dependent on, you said process today or process earlier that we've come from?
From where you came from.
Okay, so process where we came from, every day claims are coming in. Everyone involved in the claim process, we've got some automation that's going to look for certain procedure codes and diagnosis codes. It'll reroute that claim to a queue, and then we'll have an adjuster review it to make sure that it was meeting the criteria. And then we will stop the claim process on the target claims at that point in time. So it would be append a letter, outreach to the member. All right. So the outreach to the member, you guys know what that feels like, right? How much mail shows up on your doorstep? What do you do with it? How many times do you have to touch it? Well, from our labor perspective, you got the postage, you have the stoppage of the workflow, you've got the claim that starts aging, and then no one responds. So you send out the second one, you have your process, you send out your third one. Ultimately, if you don't get the response, you're going to deny it, or you're going to be pursuing phone calls real hard. So that process is pretty labor intense, but at the same time, it was also kind of annoying. And it also created extra risks too, because now we've got a claim that might be a valid claim that's kind of sitting in limbo. And, who's going to respond to the insurance company? Who's going to respond to a collection notice? What's going to be the trigger that gets that information that allows that claim to keep rolling?
That's right. So I want to, this is really good. I want to unpack this a little bit. There's two aspects I want to unpack. And the first is something, Jeff, I've heard you talk about, which is the impact on the member. What did that look like?
Okay, I'll bounce that right back at you. When's the last time you had a claim denied? Did that make your household real happy? Was everyone happy about having to do this extra thing, makes this extra call? I mean, it's all inconvenience. It's all friction. It to the member, like I said earlier, in retrospect, the biggest client complaints were those soft complaints where it's like, hey, you're sending out a lot of these, and it really did come back as, gosh, we were making people unhappy with us. I think that's, the net effect. People were unhappy that they had to do this extra piece, especially when I was at my mother-in-law's house and I slipped. Or I was in my neighbor's yard and this happened. And so a lot of these things are personal that we're asking them these extra questions about.
That's right. That's right. You've got some great numbers, actually, some data regarding what exactly you guys were doing.
So when, you bring it all the way down to the numbers, we were pending or stopping between 10 to 15,000 claims in the couple years prior to going live with this system, with the post-payment pursuit. That number dropped to 19. So we went live in 24. That number dropped to 19, from 15,000 to 19. Okay, so think about that for just a second. We're running about 85,000 claims a month through the company. We were stopping up to 15,000 a year. So we were doing that much work on that many claims that was resulting in what? It was real subjective. What did we actually get out of it? And then we dropped that number to less than 20. That's significant. Significantly less everything labor-wise, but really less annoying to our clients.
And when you think about the pinned process, it's because questionnaires happen even outside of the pinned process. They can even happen in a post-pay recovery as a way to identify cases, contacting the member. But with a pinned process, really you have two different methods that you're trying to impact. One is if you are in a state that has a required PIP or MedPay, then you're thinking that you're going to stop this from being paid in the first place. You're coordinating those benefits, and you'll pay after that policy is exhausted. But the majority of the states do not have PIP and MedPay. So what you're really using the pinned process for is that you are essentially trying to get leverage on the return of that questionnaire. So you're holding and pending the claim in exchange for getting the information or the questionnaire back from the plan member. So either way, it's very disruptive. But as far as that, the first, where if PIP and MedPay is required in the state, and that pend process is there to protect those dollars, that is also still, PIP and MedPay are also still recoverable post-pay. So you're not giving up your chance to be able to recover PIP and MedPay dollars. It's just a matter of timing. And because of that timing is where you're really taking the member disruption and the member abrasion at that beginning.
Okay, so I want to come back to this idea of member abrasion. Jeff, you've got a great story. We're talking about questionnaires. We're talking about the pend and pay process, which is, of course, we hear this debated among TPAs, among payers. What happened?
It's really funny you say leverage over member. Those are like such sanitized terms, but really, okay, no, I'm taking your employee that you love and that does good work for you, and I'm twisting their arm around the back to get them to fill this thing out. You bring it home and you make it personal. And so when we were in that space, when we were pumping these letters out every day and sending all these requests out there, the net was cast very wide. And it honestly created a situation where we had this very aha moment that when we got this response. So we had a situation where we sent out a letter of one of the 15,000 that was questioning what was happening with a patient in the ER after they were suffering from a bee sting. So allergic reaction, you got a bee sting that happens.
And there was a letter that went out. You're saying somebody got stung by a bee, and there was a letter.
Them a letter, yes.
Okay.
And so again, back to we're not lawyers and and it's not our expertise. We know how to create letters. We know how to trigger things when procedure codes and diagnosis codes.
Right.
And so we start this thing. And we happen to send this letter to a very creative person who called us on our processes, called us on how we were handling things. And it really did turn into somewhat embarrassing, come to Jesus moment where we had to look at our processes and what we're doing. But to add a little to this, after calling us out, she said, well, if you're really serious about this letter and you really want this information, I guess we haven't been able to found the carcass of the bee in order to see if they happen to have identification on them.
Body could not be found.
Body could not be found, and neither could the insurance. And so they had to consider it a sting and fly accident. So they were adding all this to the letter. And, they did suggest, though, that if we wanted to check for other coverage, we might want to check in with Progressive because of Flo's beehive hairdo, that maybe they had coverage through Progressive to see if there was anything else out there. So like I said, this was, it was funny. It was passed around. It was pretty hilarious. And we kind of said no other insurance and moved on with this. But it was an aha moment that made us really question our processes.
That was the beginning of the pivot. Go
but
ahead,
it's
Laura.
good intentions, right? I mean, because that was the process. It's good intentions to say, let's cast a wide net, because everyone is wanting to make sure that you're not overlooking recoverable opportunities. I mean, so regardless of the process, everyone has good intentions of making sure that everything is found.
What do they say about good intentions?
Exactly. But that was a great example of how, because you're using and relying on the member to be able to give you this information, casting a wide net has other consequences too. I mean, so really what it is for anything that's going to be recoverable is that you need an alternative payment source. That's ultimately what you're looking for. Exactly. And so this process of starting with the claim to then know who of a member, what questions you need to ask a member, to then try to get to that end result of, is there another alternative?
Well, your
payment
single
source?
focus is fiduciary responsibility to the plan, not realities of life.
Right. But what I would suggest is that that process needs to be reversed. And that really is our approach, is if ultimately you're trying to identify what other alternative payment policies
That's what it's
or
all about.
funds are available.
Find those alternative policies.
Yeah. If that is ultimately the goal, then start there. And so be able to gather all of the information of
You
what
said be able to.
be
Are
able
you
to.
playing on me?
Yeah, no pun intended. But be able to gather all of the information of what auto policies are out there, what legal suits are out there, what accidents have happened, and then be able to take that data intelligence and cross-reference it with your paid claims versus working in the reverse where you're using paid claims to look for hints of what you then need to get more information from the member.
So if you don't mind, if just unpack that for me a little bit, because I'm a data guy. I love, okay, how do we get to this information? So what you're saying is somewhere out in the ether, there is a accident report,
Right.
okay, that I didn't need to ask Susie Q for, but you're able to find that. So because you triggered on, I'll let you finish the sentence.
No, that's exactly right. You're exactly right. And there's going to be multiple places where that information would exist. Because you're thinking about where does alternative payment data exist. It would exist in legal suits. It would exist in police records. It would exist in P&C claims that are being created. And so being able to have that information in real time, because it's not a one-time investigation, it's continual. So as those alerts are coming in of other policies being triggered, that is then where you can have that that ecosystem that's all working together continually to identify.
So you're bouncing either off of that data because you identify that someone is a member under our plan, one of our plans, or you're taking our claim data and bouncing that up against that data to find that person that might be already going down that channel of lawsuit and so on that takes that liability
It's
there.
the former. It's the first. So we're not taking claim data out. We're bringing that data intelligence in to then cross-reference.
Got it.
So is a lot of this change, Laura, you mentioned, Intellivo's been around 27 years. We know other vendors out there too have been around about the same time. We all kind of did the same thing years ago, but now is this all being driven by technology or what's the deal?
Well, I think it's being driven by what's possible now. I mean, when we think about subrogation, you think about process. Those are the words that you were using. And processes continue just to kind of continue. We ourselves used questionnaires back in the day because honestly, that was the way you needed to gather the information, but that's not the case anymore. And so being able to have access with data partnerships, with the real-time alerts that can be created in the environment that we're in, it really opens that whole process up to say, there's an easier way.
Yeah. Jeff, let's bring it back to you. So we talked about process. We're talking about, what I'm hearing is we're talking about the shift from pend and pay to post-pay pursuit, right? What is that? What's the before and after for you? What's the after look like?
So it said a lot about what didn't work, about sort of the friction that we created that bothered people, that we didn't really pay attention to the feedback initially until we looked at the whole process. And really, it was going through looking at what the results were, looking at what the volumes of transactions were, looking at what our expertise was, holding up that mirror just a little bit and saying that we need to do something different. So, I mean, I could throw a bunch of numbers in here, but overall, friction to the member has dropped to its lowest point ever. Our Google reviews, everything about the way that members are seeing us has just really turned around. We have a great reputation because of that. The targeted savings, we're not wasting time on things that aren't real opportunities. So we're finding better real opportunities, and that savings is on just a steadily increasing trend line. And then our workflow operations, that's where the hockey stick kicks in. That's where it goes right through the roof because we're getting all these results, both in customer satisfaction and in financial results with much less work. Now, granted, we did have to do a big piece with updating plan documents to make sure everything was good for stop-loss carriers and everything on the front end of it, but that was just so tiny in comparison to all the work that was going on all year long. But ultimately, when you ask what the post looks like, we are not hearing these complaints from our customers. And honestly, our retention level is extremely high for many reasons. And we've got an unbelievable staff that does unbelievable things for our clients every day. But we now have taken this whole friction piece out, this whole extra PBA drives me nuts because that's been taken off the table, and our retention is even better than ever.
Awesome.
And that's what it's all about, that retention piece.
Got to get those renewals.
Yeah.
Most effective sales ever.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. That's right. And so those outcomes that matter most to your clients, what would you say those outcomes are?
That they're continuing to see the generated savings, and that their members are happy with the choice for them to be with PPA. So when you look at those outcomes, it's, I don't have to change my carrier because of service reasons. I don't have to go through that whole process. And, honestly, for our brokers, they are happy that they have much less that they have to take care of on a day-to-day basis.
Takes friction away from the brokers too.
Absolutely, for the brokers.
Yeah. Laura, in terms of what good post-pay looks like, what else, do you have anything else to add to this picture that Jeff is painting?
Well, I do think there are a lot of levers that can be pulled in the entire process, but the identification portion of that I just can't overstate that enough, that you're going to be limited in your recoveries if you're not able to, if you're leaving dollars on the table, essentially. So if you're not identifying everything that could be recoverable, then to expect that even fine-tuning some of those other areas of the process of negotiation and all of that, which are impactful, it is always going to be limited if your identification is limited.
Right. And it comes back to that identification piece. So, Jeff, we're coming in closer to, we want to open this up to our audience and get questions from them. This has been a really good discussion. Jeff, I want to pivot here a little bit because it's worth noting that post-pay recovery touches on something near and dear to TPAs and payers' hearts: stop loss. What's the most important thing about post-pay to stop loss?
I didn't mention it earlier, but we have a process that we go through within 60 and 30 days before renewal, which is really looking for any claims that have been declined that might still be a liability out there. Okay, so in the day that we were going through and taking more of these claims off the table because someone didn't respond, we had so many more claims that we had to chase information on in that last 60 days, that we had to go and try to get those questionnaires in so that if we had a claim that we could make it sure it was considered for stop loss within that contract period. That volume has reduced significantly because now all of these claims are not having to be chased because they haven't been put on hold. And with the plan amendments, which was the bit of the work that we had to do on the front end, we were able to, make sure the language in front of the stop loss carriers, and they know that, we're following the post-payment pursuit method and not, stopping the claims, looking for, honestly, when you look at it, what are you talking, a few $1,000s med pay against, $100,000 or $50,000 stop loss claim? That's a lot of risk being thrown on the table.
Well, and that's in it, Laura, you've talked about that, just the focus on PIP and med pay. You can leave a lot more on the table if you're not conscious of that.
Absolutely. And PIP and med pay is, for lack of better terms, first come, first serve. So that can be done at a claim level. But when you're talking about other policies, medical malpractice or UIM, that is going to require a settlement and a negotiation, essentially. So instead of being recoverable claim at a time, it essentially has to happen through subrogation because you are going to then recover that entire episode of care. It has to be one settlement that is going to be recovered. So PIP and MedPay are very unique in that fact that those are the ones that would be applicable for a prepay stop at each claim level, whereas that's just a very small example of all of the policy funds and recoverable areas that could be
But again,
explored.
back to the wide shotgun approach here.
Yeah, exactly.
It's causing so many claims to be stopped
Exactly.
over something that really is, potentially embarrassing.
Right.
If we don't get a stop loss reimbursement on a $100,000 claim because within a contract year because we held it for that reason, that would not reflect well on us.
That's true. Yep.
Definitely true. There's one other thing too about it was Jeff, you deal with a lot of, we're talking about, I think what just many TPAs and payers would say is this is a big change, right? There's kind of this pen and pay has been around a long time. You deal with lots of different plans and lots of different employers. Plan language can be changed, right? Can you?
So absolutely, we actually had to. That was part of getting this launched when we started this in 24. Was we spent the last 90 days of 23 kind of prepping our clients, getting amendments, and getting the plans pushed through so that we were prepared to start the year off fresh to get that done. Like I said, it's a little bit of work, in order to get to it. But when you look at the savings, the reduced friction for client retention, and ultimately the streamlining of workflows, it's one of those things that honestly, yes, you guys are doing a lot of technology for us, but we're doing less.
Right.
I mean, that's the piece that I hope people can take away from this is you're getting a better product by doing less work.
Yeah.
What are you hanging on
Yeah.
to because we've always done it that way, or because we're afraid X, Y, and Z will happen?
Yeah.
It's the we'll work it all the way through. Everything comes to pros and cons, positives and negatives. You have to weigh them out.
But with plan language too, in your case, there was some needs to change it, but often sometimes they're just misinterpreted.
Yeah.
So
Right.
it is important for you to have somebody like a subrogation attorney really look at it and make sure that it's being
Yeah.
interpreted correctly. Because
Yeah.
a lot of
Yeah.
times with a lot of our clients, there's not actually a plan language change that needs to happen.
Yeah. It's not as heavy a lift as you might think.
Right.
One last question before we get to, I want to hear from our audience and the questions that they have. Before we do that, Jeff, if there's one thing a TPA can do tomorrow to improve their post-pay recovery, what should it be?
This actually, based on the response that I just saw in that poll, you absolutely need to measure where you're at. Okay, how many of these are you doing? How many of them are resulting in savings? How much effort is going into what? And I know you probably can't measure within your data what you missed, but you might want to run your last couple of years' data past a qualified third party that can say, oh, well, here's what else you missed in it too, because you weren't looking at it from all these angles. So I think it's really get your metrics out there and measure what you have.
And not just dollar recoveries, but phone calls, minutes you're spending on internal
everything
process.
I said, just letter generation, phone calls you're taking, multiple letters, potential stop loss, extra workflows around stop loss to make sure things don't click through, and then client friction. And what clients have you lost because you just hit that tipping point where PBA is annoying so we're going to leave them because they're just kind of annoying, and it just is sometimes unquantifiable.
Right. Interesting. Well, this has been, I hope this has been a very insightful discussion for our audience. I think it's been. Let's get to our audience questions. I know you probably have questions for Jeff and Laura. One last poll survey, Lynn, if you want to run that, and then we'll get right into our questions.
Love to. Thanks, Brian. How confident are you that you are finding all recoverable post-pay opportunities? Are you very confident, not confident, or you're really not sure?
I can't wait to see these results. Let's see what we got.
Give it a few more minutes. Okay, I think we've got our critical mass. Let's look at the results.
Okay. 39%. Well, there you go. Almost. And I think that tracks what we saw before. 22% are confident. I think it's almost the exact same number again. So that's a great pivot point to get into our questions, to hear from our audience members. So Jeff, this is an interesting question that just came in. So this is all very interesting, and I think that this is a conversation with one of your partners. What are we looking at in terms of IT integration and setup? Is it a big job?
So the data piece of it, depending on what your capabilities are, I am 87% sure that it was a standard data extract, that no customization was done to it, depending on the capabilities of your claim system, extracts that you already have. But to be honest, that's really where it ended. We do have a little system access where we let your team log into our system to do some of the research. But again, that saves us work. That's pretty light lift there. So it's really that extract, making a secure FTP that delivers it on a frequency, all of which is pretty straightforward for getting the data out there. And they're going to get a lot more because they're taking that data from the web and pulling it down, they're going to have a lot of near misses that they might want to double check. And so again, they're taking that lift off of us.
Interesting. Yeah. Let's go to a question from Paul. Laura, this one's for you. Does Intellivo use claims data from the TPA as well as public information to find the cases?
That's a great question. And it actually ties into the previous question of, is there a big IT lift and what's required to go to this? To be able to identify what needs to be recovered and the total quantity of dollars, it's going to require the paid claims. Member eligibility is going to tell us who is represented on the plan. But as far as publicly available data or even private data with data partners, that external data, we think of it as external data coming into the Intellivo ecosystem, not claims data going out into the ecosystem. So we do use both. Our clients are providing us with paid claims, usually on a weekly file feed, and then eligibility. From that, we are able to identify the cases, initiate those cases, and pursue them all the way through to recovery.
Interesting. So there's a question, I think, there's a comment from Bill. And Jeff, this is for you. I think there's a question embedded in here. I'm interested in advanced and innovative TPAs with robust claims audits prior to payment and not solely on after the fact post-recovery efforts. So I think there's an opportunity here to address that comment.
So without getting too far off, okay, so we talk about systems, we talk about integrations, we talk about who's good at what. Okay, so you've got your standard TPA audit levels that you're going to do. So you're going to do over certain dollar amounts. You're going to do, based on certain complex procedures. You're going to do it based on a individual's trust level. So you've got your internal audits that are going to look like that. But then beyond that, who are you going to run your claims through to check them thoroughly before they get paid? So we have partnerships that we use for all of that checking, and some in and out of network as well. So we're doing an outside integration, which is a little heavier lift than something like this, because you need very fast turnaround time. You need very good analytics in order to identify those claims and the savings potential before you make it to that payment. And then you have to get it back quickly too, because if it does happen to be in network, you've got those network agreements that you've got to comply with. And you've got your claim turnaround times, any SLAs that exist that you have to comply with as well. So, but those are very doable. We've got some really good arrangements for that as well.
Yeah, I just want to, I think there's a point to be made that we're talking a lot about the post-pay here, but, as we said at the beginning, the prepay is definitely important as well.
I would say, just when you look at our entire block and you look at what PPOs produce, there is 20x savings that gets generated from that prepayment audit reviews
Sure.
that happen than
Yeah,
what
yeah.
actually comes out of subro.
Absolutely.
When you talk back to your 1%,
Yeah.
a much bigger percent gets
Yeah.
caught in that
Correct.
prepay.
Yeah.
Correct.
That's right.
And
That's right.
that's across the board for what kind of claims that
Yeah.
it contains.
Important to note. Stop loss question, Jeff. This is from Jill. We struggle with the timing of pended claims running up against stop loss filing deadlines. Does moving to a pay and pursue model create risk, or does it actually help?
I believe it helps because it does not eliminate that claim that you're waiting for information on, but by the stop loss carrier accepting your language that says that you're going to pursue it, you're creating a future where you might be writing them the check that gets recovered if they reimbursed on that claim. It's a pivot. It's really a shift in the paradigm. It kind of takes the whole thing. If you think about it like a stop loss contract, it just takes it and shifts it over here and says, okay, well, this stop loss carrier just paid $110,000 on this claim, and I just got $10,000 back. Guess who got it?
Right. Right. So clarity for the stop loss carriers is what I think we're talking about.
But is it a shift in the paradigm?
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. This question may be for both of you. This is from Jim. We like pend and pay because we still have leverage. If we release payment first, are we just letting dollars walk out the door and we're never going to see them again?
So I would ask Jim to go back to his numbers and evaluate what the total volume is, how much over the last 3 years that has brought back to the table, and what the overall impact to the operation is and to the customer satisfaction. So I'm not going to tell Jim he's wrong. I'm absolutely not. I'm just going to ask him to look at all of those numbers and say, does this still make sense for us?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's very well intentioned, right? So ultimately, you're wanting to make sure that the health plan is not covering costs that they shouldn't be covering, but reimbursements are achieving that goal as well.
Right.
So sometimes with the pinned process, it can almost be like a safety net confidence a little bit that can actually be detrimental later. And what I mean by that is because you're looking at for signals in that claims data, and because we know how many lawsuits can happen later, we know how many times MVA or workers' comp is not going to be used by the physician in that medical claim. It almost gives a sense of confidence that we've identified these, we've pended them, we've gotten the information back from the member, so we know what our pay and pursue cases need to be with other policies. And that is not the case because we know that there is a wider aperture of opportunities within there. So it can give a little bit of self-confidence that you have everything accounted for when it doesn't.
When it doesn't. Interesting.
And I'll bounce back to Jim too. Jim, take that deeper dive, but also ask your customers how it's working for them. Are they happy? Are they frustrated? Are they hearing that this is bothering their members more than it's helping the plan? And have those numbers available too before you do that, saying, hey, I recovered X for you before you have that conversation. Was it worth the aggravation that it created across the board? Because honestly, this resonates because we had the same fear. We had that confidence in the word leverage. I know it's a tricky word. Who are you holding that leverage over? It's just something that it's kind of it's one of those moves for us. It was a trust move. It was a we believe move, but we haven't had regret move. So interesting.
Well, this is great. Lynn, do we have any other audience questions? I think we've run through a lot of them here.
No, I think you've gotten them all.
Excellent. One last call for any questions. If anybody want to raise their hand, talk about post-pay. Well, we hope you all got a lot out of this discussion. Jeff, Laura, thank you for your time. Really enjoyed diving in, Jeff, to your post-pay recovery journey. Lynn, back to you.
Thank you, Brian. This does conclude our seminar. I appreciate you all joining us today for the webcast, and I'd especially like to thank Jeff, Laura, and Brian for a very informative discussion. If you missed any part of the presentation, you'll be able to listen to a recorded version within 48 hours on the EBN website, and we'll send you an email with a link to that recording. Thanks again for being with us, and have a great rest of your day.